Welcome to the FlipTech East Coast podcast, a podcast specifically designed to introduce you to our teacher presenters that are presenting at this year's conference. This year's conference is being hosted by Collingswood High School on June 29th and 30th. And in this episode, we have Dan Welty. He's a session speaker from Massachusetts talking about the transforming assessments in Flip Learning. He will be speaking June 29th, the first day of FlipTech East Coast 2018. If you're interested in hearing Dan or any other of our amazing session speakers speak at FlipTech, please visit fliptech.fliplearning.org. And we pick it up here with Dan Welty. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the FlipTech East Coast podcast. And joining us today, we have Dan Welty from Massachusetts somewhere. I'm sure he'll tell us exactly where he's from. But he is presenting at FlipTech East Coast this year on transforming assessments in flipped learning. Hey Dan, how are you today?
Good. How are you, Dave?
I'm hanging in. So, and this is the first time I've ever talked to you, really. I've seen you on Twitter every once in a while, but it's the first time I had a chance to talk to you. This is a good time.
Good. Yeah, I saw you on the Flip a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So tell us about yourself. What do you teach? Where do you teach? How long have you been flipping? Do you flip? Are you a flipper?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. I've been up here in Massachusetts for a while now. This is my 22nd year of teaching.
Wow.
And I'm in my 5th year of Flip Learning. So
Okay.
after 19 years or so, actually that doesn't add up right, does it? 24 years, I guess. I was a traditional teacher for 19 years and then learned a lot about Flip Learning on Twitter. I always say everything I learned about Flip class I learned on Twitter. And so now the last 5 years I've been doing Flip Learning, and it's just been evolving ever since.
Oh, that's cool. Have you ever? What is it that you teach? What subject area is it? So
I teach physics and astronomy in an innovations class here at Algonquin Regional High School.
Wow, astronomy. It's very rare that you see another astronomy teacher. Just so the audience knows, I also teach astronomy and chemistry. It's probably not. It's like a review. It's like a. What do they do in college? Those like a review course, not a review. What's that?
Survey course.
Yeah, survey. It's not hugely in depth, but it's something fun to add to the curriculum. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So see, we have a lot in common here already. Have you ever presented at a conference before? Is this your first one, or are you like old hat at the conference?
Well, let's see. It's really my first kind of big conference presentation. I presented a lot, probably about 15 years ago. We did a lot in Massachusetts about teacher professional development, but that's kind of gone away. So it's been a long time since I've really presented at something. So very excited to do that. I was at FlipCon back in 2015, I believe, when I was at Michigan State.
Okay. Yeah, that was a huge FlipCon too. That was like 400 people, and they had all sorts of digital sessions and stuff.
Yeah, that was a great experience, and that was my first time meeting a lot of my virtual colleagues in person. So definitely looking forward to catching up with a lot of them at FlipTech East Coast.
Yeah. Well, since this is your first kind of foray into a big conference, what made FlipTech East Coast the conference to present at? I guess there's probably a couple other big conferences that you could do. What was the draw about this?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely a passion of mine in terms of the nature of the conference, and just the close setup of relationship of what I do and what I can offer that conference.
So you're going to be presenting about transforming assessment, and so tell us specifically the viewers what they could expect to see when they get into your presentation.
Right. So my presentation is transforming assessments in Flip Learning, and it's really been an evolution of when I first started flipping back in the spring of 13. I kind of piloted it with an honors class I had. And of course, the first thing that happens when you flip is you have a lot of time in class. And what do you do with that time? And I was fortunate that I had 20 students, 10 students had iPads, and I said, all right, can we bring those in? And so I automatically started using technology. They started whiteboarding on using some whiteboarding apps and creating their own problems and sharing those problems with each other via that whiteboard app. Then they started actually using a similar one to take pictures, to take video of the labs they were doing. to then screencast those. So I'm just going from, when I pre-flip, I handed out the same worksheets, the same lab packets.
Right.
Got every kid answered the same question in the same way. I got the same right answers. I got the same wrong answers. It's just a lot of the same, very vanilla, I guess. But now with these projects, when I open up a screencast or open up a podcast, it's kind of surprising for me. I don't know what I'm going to get sometimes. And in terms of the student's choice that they have to, how are they going to present standards that they learned? What from the lab are they going to choose to showcase their learning of a certain concept? So it's really evolved from those worksheets and lab packets into how do I transform those assessments now that I have the time for students to do more?
I gotcha. And so in terms of your own journey here, has this been a kind of a gradual transformation, or when you flipped, did you immediately see all of these new transformations and say, this is the way I have to do it? Or, how did it evolve for you?
Right. It was pretty immediate because the spring of 13, when I piloted Flip Learning, I also then applied for a grant to get a class set of iPads for my classroom.
That's great.
Because we're not a one-to-one BYOD school yet. So I knew I needed technology in there that students could create things on, whether it was creating a podcast, a digital book, or a screencast. I wanted them to be creators of things that they could then share with each other. So it was pretty instant, and I knew I needed the tech to help me do it. But now it's kind of been evolving more. I think what it's evolved into more this year is students choosing things to do, like how they want to present. And then also students creating problems. So, instead of assessing them on problems that I wrote and I created, now students are creating problems that they're working on each other's problems and solving them.
Yeah,
today's a great example of that, because a student asked me a question about a problem that a pair of students behind her wrote. And I said, well, wait a minute, you're asking me about their problem. Let's talk to the creators of the problem.
Right.
And I was able to open up that discussion between the kids that actually wrote it and a student that was kind of struggling with it.
It always feels good when good learning is going on, right? Like, and it seems like it doesn't remove the teacher from the process. It just it gets the teacher out of the way of the process, and then
Absolutely, I did very much feel in the way when this student asked me about another student's problem. I said, well, hey, let's go to the source, because I didn't want to answer it for them,
If somebody was going to come to your presentation, what does that person look like? Is it any teacher, or are you going to design this specifically for the high school science teacher, or who's the target audience here?
So target audience is really anybody who is either new to flipping or has been flipping and just wants more options and wants to see what assessments, what the possibilities are in a flip classroom. Of course, I can use it. I can only use examples that I've done. So I will have examples of student work from the past 5 years based on formative assessments that I can do now in class with that time, and as well as summative assessments.
And I always say to people that that good teaching looks like good teaching. So when I first started flipping, I thought to myself, I'd really love to see what other chemistry teachers are doing or science teachers are doing. But then as I've been doing it for 4 years or so, I say, well, I just want to see what other flipped educators are doing. And that, so it's not subject specific. It's just good teaching looks like good teaching.
Right. Absolutely. It's very cross-curricular, as they would say.
Yeah. And so that kind of discusses what people are going to get out of yours. And it's exciting to think about people coming to your session and learning how to transform assessments, or at least give them, food for thought. That's really good. But the other half of coming to a conference is you being an attendee. You're going to be here and you're going to, you have your time to present. But then what do you hope to take from the conference as an attendee or just a participant in the conference?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing is just being with that group of people, people that are into flip learning, that are thinking about doing it, that have experience, because that's definitely where I want to learn from people that are doing it. I know most of us, a lot of times, are the only teacher in their school that is doing flipped learning.
Right.
So to be with my people, quote unquote, as I say, it's just refreshing, and to get that energy from people that are doing those same things and want to do more. And so it's just very energizing to be around that group.
It's interesting because I would say out of all the interviews I've done, the most common answer is that people want to be a part of. They want to be a part of that community, you know. And I always kind of juxtaposition it with, you know, we're flipping and we're talking about, you know, videos or, you know, doing things outside of the classroom, and then, you know, but bringing us together in one, you know, community, live and in person, I think is overwhelmingly what people want to do for these. I think that's why there's good opportunity here for a conference like this.
Oh, I agree. There's just a lot of great energy there, especially when you have teachers that are looking to be innovative in their teaching. You know, I'll say a lot that, you know, the first 19 years I taught were very traditional. And I think if you would ask me 19 years ago, my first year teaching, well, what do you think your teaching is going to look like 19, 20, 25 years later? You know, I think I would have hoped that, hey, it's going to look different. I would have known how different, but, you know, I'm really fortunate that I found Flip Learning, and it's really transformed a lot of things that I do, and engaging my students too.
That's cool. Can I ask you just a bonus question that I didn't send to you? Sure. Okay. Sure. So just in interest of full disclosure for the audience, I did send Dan a copy of the questions for the interview, so that he could prepare something. You know, that way he didn't feel like I was surprising him with anything. But I've been trying to ask every presenter just one kind of spur of the moment question that comes to mind. So the question is, and feel free to talk about it or, you know, talk it out, but here's the question. So if you could pick 3 words, okay, 3 words to describe your classroom right now. Okay, not right now after school on a Monday or whatever it is, but, you know, in terms of what it looks like now, what would those 3 words be? And then afterwards you can describe what you mean. I've gotten a lot of interesting responses too.
I think the first word would be student-centered.
Now, is that 1 word or 2, Dan?
Hyphenated.
Okay.
You know, and the reason I would say that is because, you know, my students are everywhere in the room. This was the first year I finally took my desk out of the room.
Oh, wow.
Because
okay.
I'm walking around, I'm helping students. So that was finally something I've done 5 years later. So again, every year I try to evolve it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a really great experience to just keep me out amongst my students and helping them.
Right.
Second one would be noisy, because it is a very loud environment. Kids are talking, they're wrestling with ideas, struggling with things, or trying to learn things on their own with my guidance. Third word, definitely energetic. You know, kids are definitely energized coming in. You know, and there's a lot of things going on, kind of controlled chaos sometimes.
Yeah, if you would have started with controlled chaos, that would have been 2 words, and that, unless you want to hyphenate that word, that too. But well, that's interesting. What were they? They were student-centered, energetic, and noisy. I like those 3 words. I had one presenter whose 2 of the 3 words were stuffed animals. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Elementary school?
What's that?
Elementary school class?
Middle school social studies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so it was interesting. It's always interesting to hear what people are doing in their own classroom. But
along those same lines, a lot of people now on Twitter the past couple of weeks, a lot of people have been tweeting out Lego models that they're having their students do to show concept. I think it's Michael Matera that does a lot of that with his gamification and stuff.
Right. Yeah, I've seen some Lego things pop through my feed. It's funny to see. Funny, not funny, haha, but funny, like interesting, funny to see these things pop through your Twitter feed. Well, I guess that concludes our interview with Dan Welty. Please come out and see him at FlipTech East Coast and June 29th and 30th, and we'll see you then.
Great. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of the FlipTech East Coast podcast. We hope that you join us at the conference. Again, for more information or to register, please visit fliptech.fliplearning.org. Again, that website is fliptech.fliplearning.org, and we can't wait to see you there.